Good afternoon, my darlings. Let's get this straight. There we are. I promised you a treat. We're going into the weekend. What could it possibly be? James Herbert Domain. Now, I have covered this a couple of times, but I didn't go into great detail with it. And I figured today is the day, 'cause what is it good for? War. Absolutely nothing. Say it again. Yes. Domain. It is the squeakquel of squeakquels. It sure is. It was first published January the 1st, 1984 by New English Library, and the paperback edition is a New English Library August 1985, of which this is a copy, so it's a first edition like my others. I was 9 years old when this came out in 1985. Yeah, only 9, and dealing with such fabulous subjects like nuclear war. Yes, oh yes, I am a Cold War baby, and I grew up with the golf balls at Fylingdale, and we used to travel past them when we went to Whitby on days out when we were little girls. Yes. I have yes, I have a family, and yeah, we used to go out on days out to Whitby, and we used to pass the golf balls. So there you go. So that makes me a Cold War baby. Indeed it does. Well, this is James' 9th book, and I was 9 years old. So you know what, James, we were meant to be, my darling. We really were. We meet our main protagonists, Steve Culver and Kate Garner. All Steve wants to do is date Kate, but the rats have other plans. Welcome to the squeakquel to end all squeakquels. It's got it all. More gore, more war, more paws and teeth. All the better for eating you, my dears. If nuclear war wasn't bad enough, why, China? Why? What did we do to you? Along came the ratty-roos, who are going to be your worst nightmare. Indeed, they are going to finish what they started. I'm going to read you the first little bit. Time, 12:37. Day, Tuesday. What a day Tuesday was. The month of June. The year, no, not too distant future. June is only a few weeks away, everybody. Where are we? We are in London. Yes. Part 1. Advent. They scurried through the darkness, shadowy creatures living in permanent night. They had learned to become still, to be the darkness. When the huge monsters roared above and filled the tunnels with thunder, assaulting the black refuge, their cold, damp sanctuary with rushing lights and deadly crushing weight, they would cower as the ground beneath them shook. The walls around them trembled, and they would wait until the rushing thing had passed. Not afraid, but necessarily wary, for it was an inveterate invader, but one which killed the careless. They had learned to keep within the confines of their underworld, to venture out only when their own comforting darkness was sistered with the darkness above, for they had a distant race memory of an enemy, a being whose purpose was to destroy them, a being who existed in the upper regions where there was vast dazzling light, a place that could be explored safely only when the brilliance diminished and succumbed to concealing and pleasurable darkness. But even in the darkness there was not absolute. Different kinds of individual lights pierced the night, yet these were feeble and created shadows that were veiling allies. They had learned to be timid in exploration, never moving far from their sanctum. They fed on night creatures like themselves, and often came upon food that was not warm, that did not struggle against the stinging caresses of the creature's jaws. The taste was not as exciting as the moist and tepid moving flesh, but it filled their stomachs, it sustained them. Yet in this too they were cautious, never taking too much, never returning to the same source, for they possessed an innate cunning, born of something more than fear of their natural enemy. It was an evolution, accelerated by something that had happened to their species many years before, an event that changed their pattern of progression and made them alien even to those of their own nature. They had learned to keep to the depths, to keep themselves from the eyes of the enemy, to take food but never enough to arouse unwelcome attention, to kill other creatures but never to leave remains, and when there was not enough food, they ate each other, for they were many. They moved in darkness, black, bristling beasts, with eyes huge. They had huge humped hindquarters and long jagged incisors, their eyes pointed and yellow. They sniffed at the dank air, and a deep instinct within craved for a different scent, a scent which they did not know yet was a sweet odour of running blood, human blood. They would soon know it. They tensed as one when their keen long ears picked up a distant wailing, a haunting whining they had never heard before. They were still, many risen on haunches, snouts twitching, furs stiffened. They listened and were afraid, and their fear lasted for long as the sound lasted. Silence came, and it was more frightening than the sound. Still they waited, not daring to move, barely breathing. A time passed before the thunder came, and it was 1,000,000 times louder than the giant rushing things they shared the tunnels with. It started as a low rumbling, quickly becoming a great roar, shaking their underworld, rending the darkness with its violence, tearing at the walls, the roof, causing the ground to rise up and throw the creatures into scrambling heaps. They lashed out at each other, clawing, gouging, snapping, frenzied with razor teeth. More thunder from another source. Dust, fumes, sounds filled the air, rumbling buildings becoming shrieking. More thunder, the world and its underworld shivering, screaming. The creatures ran through the turbulence, black furried bodies striving to reach their inner sanctum within the tunnel, fighting to exist, deafened by the noise, squealing their panic, desperate to return to the mother creature and her strange cohorts. The man-made caverns shuddered but resisted, and unleashed a pressure from the world above. Sections collapsed, others were flooded, but the main body of the tunnels withstood the impacts that pounded the city. and after a while the silence returned, save for the scurrying of many, many clawed feet. We are at chapter 1, but we are going to just read this small vignette. Yes. Jeanette, real name Brenda, stared out from the 8th floor window of the London Hilton, her gaze upon the vast expanse of greenery below. She casually lit the cigarette dangling from the corner of her lipstick-smeared lips, while the Arab and his 2 younger male companions scrabbled around the suite for their clothes. The older man for his pure white robes, the other 2 for the sharply cut European suits. The buggers deserved to panic, she thought, without too much rancour, a stream of cigarette smoke escaping her clenched lips. According to the newspapers, they were the cause of all of this, holding the world to ransom with their bloody precious oil, sulking at the merest diplomatic slight, doling or not doling out the stuff as the mood took them, acting like spoilt kid in whose house the party was going on. You can have a cake, Amanda, but you can't, Clara, 'cause I don't like you this week. Well now, they'd all paid the price. The party was over. She studied the scurrying people in the street below, the riders spurring their horses along Rotten Row, the lovers running hand in hand through the park. There were some resigned like her, who were just lying down in the grass, waiting for whatever was on its way. Jeanette flinched when a pedestrian trying to cross the traffic-filled Park Lane was tossed over a car bonnet. The person, no telling whether it was a man or woman from that height, lay by the roadside, not moving, and with nobody bothering to help. At least he or she was out of it. Behind her, the Arabs were screaming at one another, pulling on trousers, shirts. The old fat man, the first to look decent because he only had his long frock to wriggle into. He was already heading for the door, the other 2 hopping half undressed behind him. Fools! By the time the lift came up, it would all be over. And they wouldn't get far down the stairs. At least the sirens had stopped. They were more frightening than the thought of oblivion to come. Jeanette drew in the cigarette and enjoyed the smoke. 40 a day, and it wasn't going to kill her. Her laugh was short, sharp, almost silent, and her looks would never fade. She glanced around the empty hotel room and shook her head in disgust. They lived like pigs, and they copulated like pigs. How would they die? No prizes guessing, like pigs. Still, she met a few on her Park Lane beat who were real gentlemen, who treated her with the respect and certain amount of gentleness. They were a bonus. These days she had learned to be less choosy. Her best years, although they hadn't fulfilled the ambition, they were what she termed the up and down years, where she is now. It had worked for a celebrated but unrated actress acquaintance of hers, a woman only famous for being famous, for being recognised because of the big wheeler she slept with. The strategy had landed that particular lady with a millionaire husband, who had soon divorced her, making the venture highly profitable. Countless pop stars and name photographers had added to her notoriety and bank balance. The technique was simple, though it could prove expensive. The hotel Jeanette had used as had her actress friend, was further along Park Lane, its flavour more English than the Hilton. She had booked into the cheapest room possible, which wasn't cheap, and spent most afternoons and evenings riding the elevators, down the guest lift from the top, through the huge reception area or lounge, a short walk around the block to a service lift up to the top again, and then back down via the guest lift. She nearly always scored when just one man or maybe two occupied the elevator with her. A small shy smile from them, a word about the weather, an invitation to take tea or a drink in the bar, perhaps dinner, and then that was it. She was home and dry. Of course it didn't take long for the hotel staff to cotton on, but any such establishment, no matter how high class, allowed a certain amount of license in such things, so long as there was no trouble. The hookers weren't obvious, no money went missing, the management turned a blind eye, yet watchful eye. Jeanette had never got to live one. Plenty of almost, but never the McCoy. Now it was just a bit too late. Her looks were not as fresh, the bait not as succulent, hence the Park Lane Mayfair beat. Assignments were often made by phone, but nowadays it paid to pound the pavement. She could do without these sessions with 3 or more participants. They were a little too exhausting. She turned back to the window, pressing her forehead against the cool glass. The cries from those below drifted up, and her eyes began to moisten. Is this all it amounted to? Is this where it all led? 8 floors up in a hotel bedroom, naked as the day I was born, sore from the abuse to every orifice in my body by 3 clients. Some climax, some joke. Jeanette pushed herself off the window pane, stubbing out the cigarette on the glass. Maybe there was something better waiting. Maybe there was nothing. Well, even that was better. She tried to blink when the world became a white flash, but her retinas had already shriveled to nothing, and her body and the glass had fused into one as the building fell backwards. Oh, Jeanette, what a way to go. The best bang before the big bang. Oh, my darling, at least you went out the way you wanted to. How many of us can say that if we ever get one of those wonderful missiles heading our way, how many of us can have the balls to say, I lived my life and I'm going to die my way? Jeanette did. Or shall we really call you by your real name? Brenda. Good on you, Brenda girl. You can see what kind of a book you're getting into. Nuclear war. We get absolutely arseholed by the Chinese. There isn't anything left except for the rats. Oh my goodness me, the rats. They're waiting for us, darling, deep down below. In the tunnels of London. Yes, the London Underground. That's where these little buggers have been hiding out. Growing, feeding, multiplying. Yet, here we are. How on earth, after the debacle in Epping Forest, did we end up with the little blighters here? Thank you, British government. Oh my goodness me. You've surpassed yourselves this time, lads. You've really surpassed yourselves. Why initiate a breeding programme? I know you want to study them, but Cockwombles. You are cockwombles. I cannot believe that you would willingly recreate these creatures and allow them to run amok under your watch. And then, what were you hoping? That the nuclear war was going to sweep your little problem away? No, it just made it worse, because these creatures are impervious to nuclear fallout because they're enhanced. They're rats, but not rats. These are lab rats. The return of the lab rats. The lab rats are going to do the experiment on you this time, not the other way around. Oh my giddy aunt. This is just another little section from the book. A noise. He listened intently. A scratching sound. He waited. Nothing. Gone now. Plimpton tried to stretch his body, but there wasn't much room, even to straighten his legs. He flexed the muscles in his back and twisted his neck from side to side, refraining from groaning, not wanting to wake the others. What time was it? The digital features on his watch glowed green on his wrist. 23:40. Night. There was no other way of telling night from day. Not there, not in their small dusty prison. How long, dear God, how long had they been down there? 2 days? 3? A week? No, it couldn't be that long, could it? Time didn't count for much when shadows failed to move. But what had woken him? Had Kevin cried out in his sleep once more? What did the boy think of the grown-up world now? Plimpton reached for a small pen light he carried in his shirt pocket and flicked it on, sheltering the small beam with his hand. The urge to switch on the larger lamp hanging from a peg just above his head was strong, but he had to conserve the batteries, no telling how long they would have to stay down there. The candles too, they had to be saved. He shone the light towards his son, the pinpoint of light barely touching the boy's eyes. His sleeping hours had been erratic and restless throughout, without spoiling what now appeared to be a deep slumber. Kevin's face was peaceful, his lips slightly parted, only a dust smear on one cheek giving evidence that all was not quite normal. A slight movement of the wrist, and another face was revealed close to the boy's, but this wasn't old, the skin grey like dry wrinkled paper. Gran's mouth was open too, but it held none of the sensuous innocence of this son. The opening hardly any lips any more, was too round, the cavern too black and deep. It seemed every breath exhaled let slip a little more of her life. And the face turned towards her, his son, drew in that escaping life in short, shallow intakes, as though quietly stealing his grandmother's existence. Ian? Plimpton's wife was distant, full of sleep. He turned the light towards her, and she closed her barely opened eyes against it. "It's all right," he whispered. "I thought I heard something outside." She turned from him, snuggling further down into the sleeping bag. "It was probably Cassie," she rumbled. "Poor dog." Sean had already returned to her dream before he switched the torch off, and he was hardly surprised. Like him, she had only slept fitfully, and not for very long since they had been ensconced in their improvised shelter. Ian Plimpton sat there in the dark beneath the basement, his ears sensitive, eyes watching the blackness. There had been many noises through the dark hours, the wreckage above them settling, distant thunder, faraway explosions that still managed to make the remains of his house shiver. Sometimes it felt as though the trains were still running below the foundations, but he was sure this couldn't be so. Everything above and everything below must have been destroyed by the bombs. At the very least, there could be no more power to run the trains. Thanks to him, his family had been saved. Sean had scoffed when he had studiously read the Home Office's survival booklet, and he himself had felt embarrassed by his own attention to it. Nevertheless, he had taken it seriously. Not at first, of course. His initial inclination when the booklet had fallen through his letterbox on the doormat was to glance through it, then toss it into the waste bin. But something had made him keep it, to hide it between books in his study. A rational fear that someday the instructions might come in useful, and later tension around the Gulf states had caused him to retrieve it and study the directions more thoughtfully. The booklet had advised householders to find a protected refuge in their own houses, a cellar or cupboard beneath the stairs. Plimpton's house had both. The steps leading down to the basement area had a cupboard beneath them to go to such lengths as whitewashing all the windows in his house would have made him the laughing-stock of the neighbourhood, even when the world crisis was reaching breaking point. But internal measures could be easily taken without public knowledge. Things like collecting 1 or 2 plastic buckets for sanitation purposes, as well as storing water, and stocking tinned food, not upstairs but in the larder where it would disappear through daily use, but he hid it down in the basement itself, on a shelf where it would be forgotten, unless or until it was needed. Keeping sleeping bags and bedding somewhere handy, somewhere they could conveniently be grabbed from should the emergency arise. Having more than 1 torch and a lamp, plus a supply of batteries, candles, containers, portable stove, first aid kit, toilet paper, essentials ready. And of course the clutter under the stairs had to be cleared, and a tattered mattress brought down from the loft to lean against the outside of the cupboard door. He was thankful too for the old chest of drawers that stood battered and unloved in one corner of the basement. That would have afforded added protection with the mattress against the door. He hadn't blocked up the small basement window, whose top half was street level, and there had been no time to do so when the sirens had alarmed the district. But he had done the best for his family, and they had survived the worst. Or had they? Perhaps there was more that he could have done. He could have built a brick shelter in the cellar. He could have piled up sandbags against the stairway. He could have reinforced the ceiling over their heads, kept the bath and sink filled, but build a stronger lean-to against the stairs. He could have moved his family up to the Scottish Highlands. Oh my goodness, my poor boy, I wish you had. No, he had carried out his duty. Not many men would have done more, but most of all, he had been with his family when the bombs were dropped. Well, that's something, isn't it? At least you were with them in the end. Kimpton was of a new breed of businessman. His office was his own study. His master and tool, the computer, he kept there. He could contact every major office of the company which employed him in any part of the world with just a few deft finger punches of the keyboard. No office politics, no commuter travelling, no grovelling to the boss. Even so, it was a busy life, and one he enjoyed. It meant he saw a lot more of Kevin. That's his son. The scratching sound again. Somewhere outside in the basement itself. Was it the dog? Had Cassie found her way into the cellar? Impossible. Kimpton had never locked their pet out. He'd had to lock their pet out, much to the distress of Kevin. for there was no way they could have had an animal living with them. It would have been too unhygienic, and Christ, it was bad enough already without having a dog messing all over the place. And Cassie would need precious food as well. They had to listen to her howling after the bombs had fallen, then the whimpering and whining for days. Could it have been a week? With Kevin more upset by the noise than by the Holocaust? Well, of course he would be. It's his pet dog. They hadn't heard Cassie for a long time now, and Kimpton wondered if the dog had wandered off to another part of the house, if it was in another part standing, or was she slumped against the cellar door, nose pushed forwards towards the draughty crack beneath, weakened, frightened, or dead. Maybe she got outside and was trying to get through the basement window. He shifted his legs, groaning, as Bones wearily protested. The only way he could sleep was in an upright position. There just wasn't room for them all to lie down. They were supposed to stay inside the refuge for at least 48 hours, and inside the house, preferably the basement, for much longer. 2 weeks at least, maybe more. The sirens would sound again when it was safe to come out. What sirens? They've been incinerated. There's nothing left. There's nothing at all. It's all gone. He could risk leaving the cupboard now, he was sure. They must have been inside for at least a week. And the stink from the plastic bucket doused with disinfectant and covered with polythene bag though it was, would make them all ill before much longer. The others needn't be disturbed. He could push the door open just enough to squeeze through with the bucket. The mattress wedged against the chest of drawers would provide an escape tunnel. He could check on the dog while he was out there. Plimpton shrugged himself loose from the covering blanket and groped for the larger torch he kept by his side. His hands closed around Gran's bony ankle, but she did not stir. Her flesh was cold, even though the atmosphere inside the cupboard was warm and clammy. She refused to get into the sleeping bag, proclaiming it was too much like sleeping in a straitjacket, and that she couldn't breathe. So she used it as a mattress, having a blanket wrapped around her instead. He found the torch, then groped for a plastic bucket with its full contents. It was embarrassing for them all to squat over such a thing in front of others, even though they were a family, and despite having the lamp turned off. Darkness couldn't cover the sounds, nor smother the cells. But Plimpton would not give in to their protests and allow any of them outside the refuge. The bucket wasn't easy to find in the dark. Practically everything was in reach, and he lifted it by its wire handle. His nose wrinkled in disgust. Half turning, Plimpton pushed against a small door to his right, only the pressure from the mattress outside giving some resistance. He leaned his shoulder more firmly into the wood, and the gap widened. Sian moved restlessly behind him. "Ian," she said, both weariness and urgency in her voice. "It's okay. Go back to sleep. Don't wake the others." "What are you doing?" said Sian. "Getting rid of this damn bucket," he whispered back. "Is it safe? Isn't it too soon to go out there? We're all right in the cellar as long as I don't stay out too long." "Please be careful," said Sian. "I will. Go back to sleep." He had to squeeze through the opening sideways, the chest of drawers allowing little more than 12-inch clearance. The bucket was pushed before him. Once he had wriggled himself outside, he switched on the torch, waiting for the dazzle in his eyes to fade before venturing further, the mattress forming a soft, narrow lean-to over him. It smelled musty and dank, and he dismissed thoughts of what must be crawling around inside it. All those years in the loft must have turned it into a wonderful home for little creeping things. The concoction of smells from bucket and mattress made his stomach want to heave. But then the stench of his own vomit would have made matters even more uncomfortable for all of them. Plimpton swallowed hard. The sooner he was out of the comparative openness of the cellar, the better. He wondered if there would be any cellar left. Perhaps the whole house had fallen in, leaving the basement open to the skies, to the fallout. Oh, so stupid. They would surely have known if that were the case. It had been quiet down there. The distant rumbles were that, just distant. The air was heavy and stale. The old Islington houses were solid, built in a time when mixtures for bricks were mortar and not skimped. Foundations were solid, walls were steadfast. Probably not too much of London was left up there. No, really. But Plimpton knew that there was a certain protection in the rows of houses depending on which direction the blast or blasts came from. His own big terraced house was roughly in the middle of a block, so he might have been lucky unless the front or back was exposed. With a sigh of relief, he was free. He pushed the bucket as far away as possible and rested for a moment, his shoulders clear of the protective corridor. Fearful, he raised the torch, dreading what might find, expecting the basement to be in ruins, the ceiling caved in, debris everywhere, perhaps the night sky peering in. He silently cursed himself for doubting his earlier rationalism. The light beam confirmed his reasoning. The ceiling, though large, chunks of plasters were missing, had withstood the impact. Plimpton quickly swept the beam around the basement and stopped when he fell upon a small window. Rubble had poured through, smashing both glass and frame, creating a slope of debris. At least the opening was completely filled, leaving no room for fallout dust to sneak in. Using elbows and knees, he pushed himself clear of the tunnel and stood, his chest heaving with the exertion, surprised that such a small effort had left him so breathless. All the hours of cramped inactivity, combined with the stale air they had been forced to breathe, had taken their toll. The scratching sound again. His chest stopped its swelling, his breath only half drawn. He swung the torch into the far corner. Nothing. There, along the base of one wall, an old bicycle of Kevin's, a three-wheeler, broken laser beam, space rifle, leaning against it, Shan's ancient washing machine, the bin men had refused to take away. A record player, the old type you could stack 8 discs on, valves dead and dust furred inside. Another corner, light bouncing off an old frameless mirror. Nothing more. The next wall leading back towards the stairs. Nothing. No junk, no discarded furniture. Just something that shouldn't be there. A shadow, but nothing to cause it. He steadied the torch, peered closer, and scrabbling sounds from above. Frantic claws against the wood. The stairs. It came from the top of the stairs. And then a whimper. A mewling, begging whimper. Plimpton let the half-breath go, then drew in a full, slow breath. Cassie had heard him down there. The poor old bitch was trying to get to him. He shone the torch up the stairs, and the scratching became more frenzied. Ooh! She could probably see the light beneath the door. He'd better calm her down before she woke the others. Quietly as possible, Plimpton climbed the wooden steps, at once relieved and disappointed that Cassie was still alive. Alive, she possessed a problem. A small excited yelp as he approached. The clawing increased. As his head drew level with the foot of the door, he leaned forward, one hand resting against the wood top step, his mouth moving close to the gap under the wood. Below him something moved, from an unusual shadow in the wall. "Cassie," he said quietly. A small, tired bark came back. "Good girl, Cassie," he soothed. "Keep it quiet, there's a good dog." The whimpering and pleading continued. "I know, Cassie. I know, girl, you're scared. You want to be with us, but I can't let you in. Not just yet. Understand, I want to, but I can't." The rejection was painful, and the urge to open the door was almost irresistible. He had to be hard, though, had to be firm. Human beings were more important than pets. The dog would create too many problems down there. The hygiene risk would be too great. Cassie was becoming overexcited. Another shape was born from the shadow. It lingered for a moment, a dark form concealed by the surrounding blackness. It moved stealthily, joining its companion. Oh God. Climpton wondered if he should open the door a little, just enough to reassure Cassie, perhaps calm her. The dog was losing control, becoming too frenzied. Gee, I wonder why. "Hush, girl. Come on now, Cassie, be quiet." His tone was harsher. The sound of the dog's paw against the wood was a continuous rapid friction. "Hey, cut it out!" Cassie wailed while the other thing slid from a deep shadow that wasn't a shadow, but a rent in the wall and in the floor, a fissure caused by the shifting of earth, the movement of concrete. The rupture reached down to the sewers beneath the streets. The man on the stairs was unaware of the skulking, bristled, furried beasts. Oh, you poor people. These creeping things as they filled swiftly from the opening like smooth black fluid. "Cassie, just shut up, will you?" Climpton thumped at the door with the flat of his hand. But the dog yelped even more, all the weakness gone from her cries. Soon she began to growl, and her master wondered if the ordeal had not driven her mad. Sian's muffled voice came from below. "Ian, what's going on up there? You've woken all of us up." Dad, is that Cassie?" came Kevin's voice. "Please let her in. Please bring her down." "You know we can't. Just go back to sleep." Climpton knew the boy would be crying in the arms of his mother or his gran. Bloody dog, as if they didn't have enough to worry about. He pulled back as something solid thumped against the door, rattling the wood in its frame. Good Lord! The dog was throwing itself against the door in its desperation. He should have done something about the animal before they came down here. He should have cut its throat. Oh, he couldn't see himself doing that. Or locked it in a cupboard, but there hadn't been time. No time to think, no time to act sensibly. Thump! "Stop it," Climpton shouted, banging his fist against the door. "You stupid bloody pest! Stop it!" One of the night creatures stood poised at the foot of the stairs, its yellow eyes glinting, a reflection from the torch beam. 2 long-clawed feet rested against the bottom step, and its back was hunched, giving it an arched appearance. It studied the man for long moments, until its snout twitched. It stiffing the air. It moved away from the step and sniffed its way around the plastic bucket, attracted by the aroma. The sound of movement close by diverted its attention. Its night-seeing eyes, that distinguished the black tunnel from the lesser denser of the cellar. Different colours drifted from there. The animal approached in a small scurrying movement, poking its long snout into the opening. Further sounds excited the creature, for they were living noises, and instinctively it was aware that the animal who made the sounds were weak. its jaws opened to reveal long, sharp teeth that dripped with wetness. The rat entered the tunnel. Its body, with its wide, powerful haunches and hunched back, fitting comfortably. One of its companions followed, then another. The pink scaly tail of the last rat slithered snake-like through the dust of the cellar before disappearing into the inner blackness. Above, Cassie was barking frantically, running away from the door, then returning with a crashing thump, throwing herself so hard at the wood that Clinton felt sure she would burst through. He was frightened by her actions, fearing that if she did break into the cellar, she would run amok. Her screeching bark was near demented, and Clinton shuddered to think of the effects of a bite from a mad dog. He staggered back at the force of the next throw, grabbing the handrail to keep his balance. How the hell could he pacify her now? How could he soothe her? How could he make her damn well stop? Wasn't their nightmare enough? A scream from below. Sean! Kevin! He turned on the stairs, and the torch beam swung downwards. Clinton almost collapsed, and if he had, he would have fallen among them, for the cellar was alive with thick furry bodies, a black carpet of moving shapes, squirming, leaping over each other's backs, never still, long pointed noses raised here and there to sniff the air, eyes caught in the glare of the torch, glinting yellow like those of cats. A terrible mass of writhing vermin, so big, so huge, like nothing he'd ever seen before. Monstrous, hideous. No! He cried when his family's screams broke through his shock. Looking over the handrail, he saw the creature disappearing into the mattress tunnel to the shelter. His family was screaming beneath his feet. Clinton ran down the steps, leaping the last few, landing among the rats, stumbling, falling to his knees. He lashed out with the torch, and the creature scurried away. He was up, kicking out, screaming at them, tearing at the chest of drawers, pulling it aside, ignoring the teeth that sank into his calf muscles. He pulled at the mattress, and the cupboard door swung away with it. Nothing made sense in the torchlight. All he could see was a jumble of struggling shapes, something white here and there, something white but smeared with dark red, and the red was his family's blood. A weight thudded against his back, but it did not feel the razor's teeth slash his skin, tearing the flesh away with his shirt. A large, loose flap. He did not feel the mouth that tightened round his thigh, the long incisors seeking the warm liquid within. He did not feel the claws that raked the back of his legs, nor the snapping jaws that gained purchase between them. He only felt the pain of his wife, his son, and his mother. Clawed feet scurried up his back, reaching his shoulders, teeth finding a hold on his neck, knocking him forward so that he fell into the opening to join his family in their blood-drenched refuge. At the top of the stairs, the door rocked against its frame as Cassie threw herself against it, the blows becoming more rapid, more forceful, the wood rattling against its frame, the air filled with yelps and screams and squealing. As the screams eventually faded, so the blows became weaker, and when the sounds in the cellar were only feeding noises, the dog's barks became a wailing moan, and when the blows stopped and the door was still, all that could be heard was a muffled whimpering sound, and from below a rapacious gnawing. Cassie, Plimpton was trying to warn you, you stupid, foolish man. She didn't want you to die. Oh, and all you've left your dog with, your poor girl, she's crying because she couldn't save you. So, I won't spoil any more of the book for you, my darling, but that chapter has always stayed with me. It is absolutely terrifying. You're hiding out in a nuclear shelter that you built yourself, and you can't escape. There is no escape. And then these government programmed rats have now just eaten you and your family and left your dog to cry for your passing. Isn't this an absolutely fantastic way to end the Rats trilogy? I told you it was the squeakquel to end all squeakquels. Play on words, I know, my darlings. There is a fourth novel, and it's actually a graphic sort of, it's very cartoonish. It's a graphic novel, and it is brilliantly done, and it neatly ties up the entire trilogy, if you like. I'm glad they did it. I know it gets an awful lot of hate, but I'm really glad that they did The City, because it's nice to know what happened after the nuclear war. The people that did survive, Steve Culver and Kate Garner, along with some government officials, we do follow their journey through and the things that they have to go through to survive. It actually makes you question whether or not surviving nuclear war is worth it, or perhaps it's just better to go out and look at the bright flash and poof, off you go into a pile of dust. I suppose if you're living out in the country like we are, we would inevitably survive because we're miles away from a place that could be bombed. And the nearest places that could be bombed to me are Sheffield, Leeds and Manchester, possibly Bradford. So those are the places that would be bombed near me, but I am quite literally out in the sticks. I'm on moorland, so I'm actually not too far from a government shelter that was built during the Cold War, and it's out on the moors where I actually live, so I know the location of it. So yeah. Imagine that, having a nuclear fallout shelter in your back garden. Not many people can claim that now, can they? But yes, it is there. We are on the grid, so you know, we're sort of how can I put it, a lookout point between here and York. Yeah, we were supposed to during the day, had a bomb gone off, we should have radioed through, whoever was manning the station would have radioed through anything of any notable interest, like if you saw a flash, which probably would have been a bomb. Yeah, and then they had to say how big the flash was and which way the wind was blowing, I suppose, and whatever other information they might have needed. But yeah, so that's basically what this book is. It's the survivors of a nuclear war who are down in the underground, with unwittingly not realizing that the rats are also down there in the underground with them. It's all so very terrifying, and the rats are after them, and the rats are going to get them if they don't get out of the way pretty damn smartish. And it's absolutely cat and mouse, or rat and human, right up to the very end when do they escape? I'm not going to spoil it for you. You're going to have to read the book to find out. But the nuclear war aspect, as well as the rat aspect, makes this the most unique book. You will never read another quite like this. It's a completely different take to nuclear war. If you like nuclear war kind of stories, or you know, if you're a fan of Threads, this is like 10,000,000,000,000,000 times worse than Threads, or The Day After, the American version of Threads, which I thought was quite tame compared to Threads. Well, like, this is a billion squillion times worse than Threads because of the rat element and the fact that the rats aren't affected by the nuclear fallout because they are so genetically modified. It's the stuff that nightmares are made out of. Yeah, I mean, as the tagline says, the rats have inherited the earth. Well, yes, they have, because it just baffles me as to why the government thought it absolutely imperatively necessary to do a breeding program, and then, you know, they wonder why things go wrong, and then they hold their hands up and say, oh, lessons will be learned. Oh, really? I don't mean to sound so cynical, everybody, but, you know, with age comes wisdom. I may lose my looks, but my goodness, I gain wisdom. It's an absolutely wonderful read. It's unique. You will never ever find another like this, and I feel it's a very fitting way to end James's trilogy. It's not for the faint-hearted. You will be thinking about this book long after you've put it down. It is a pivotal part of my childhood. I read this as a teenager, and it's just a love affair that I've had with James my entire life. I absolutely adore James, as you know, and I feel that every book that he writes, he brings something different. He's always keeping the reader on their toes, and he always makes sure that you get the full enjoyment from his work. He has a standard, and his standard is always leave the reader wanting more. And you do. Reading all of his books, you are always left reading them and always saying, I want more. Give me more, James. And I can honestly say you will never ever be disappointed with any of his books, because each one is unique and each one brings such a level of enjoyment and such pleasure. It really, really is absolutely a wonderful experience reading his books. So, on that note, I would say, if you haven't read it, go get yourself a copy. It's widely available on Kindle. It has an audio book, and it also does in paperback and hardback. Now, these paperbacks are getting harder to get hold of, but they are still going for a reasonable price. So, my darlings, I shall leave you wondering whether or not it's worth surviving a nuclear war. And on that note, my darlings, happy readings and enjoy. And until the next time, my loves, happy readings, don't have nightmares, and enjoy. Take care, my darlings, and until next time, goodbye.